and jump right in and kick things off. So once again, welcome to the Wisconsin Tableau user group. Happy New Year. My name's Patrick McCormick, and I'm joined by our new leadership team for the Wisconsin Tableau user group. So previously it was just Brandi and myself, but we're super excited to get more people involved to help continue to provide valuable events to the Tableau user group community. With that, I would like to invite each member of the leadership team to do a brief intro. And with that, Brandi, do you want to kick things off?
Sure, happy to. Hi, everyone. My name is Brandi Beals. You've probably seen me around or heard from me many times, so I'll generally keep it short, but well, you know what? I'll keep it really short because I'm going to be presenting later today, and I'll talk a little bit more about me then. But I've been part of the Wisconsin Tableau user group leadership team since the very beginning, when Patrick kind of came up with the idea. And so really happy to kind of be here and expand the people who are helping put these meetings together. I'll turn it over to Jen.
Thanks, Brandi. Hey, everybody. I'm Jen Shepard. A lot of you probably know me as well since I've been on the Madison TUG leadership team for about 5.5 years. I'm really excited to help lead this group as well. We've got lots of plans for the year for our always virtual, always will be virtual Wisconsin group. And so glad to have so many of you join us from near and far. A little bit about me. I am a contractor. I build data visualizations full-time as a career currently. I have 2 main clients. I work for the state of Wisconsin Department of Children and Families, and I also build dashboards for the Arts Education Data Project. I've been using Tableau for, I should really know this number off the top of my head, let's say 8 years. It's been a while. I like it a lot, and I'm excited to share some of the newer features with you in our meeting today. So welcome, everybody. How about Olivia?
I don't know that Olivia's with us at the moment, so we'll skip to Dr. Rob.
Perfect.
Good morning and welcome. I'm Rob Robotham. I've been using Tableau for about 7 or 8 years now, active in the Madison Tableau users group, and I've also been an attendee of the Milwaukee users group, just because geographically I'm kind of in between at home. Work up in Fond du Lac for the Grande Cheese Company. I've been there for 29 years and do a lot of different things that are all data related. So just excited to continue to use Tableau and all the different things that we do with it. And as long as I'm Rob, we'll turn it over to Robert.
Thanks. I'm Robert Salas. I've been using Tableau for about 7 years. I work primarily at the Department of Children and Families and lead our Tableau practice there, as well as the server site admin. Relatively new to the Tableau user group leadership team in Madison just since late last year, and also to the Wisconsin leadership team with this most recent meeting. Nice to meet you all.
Tammy?
Okay, hi, I am Tammy Brown, and I am brand new to, this is my first time being on the leadership team for a TUG group. I'm a lead data analyst for TDS Telecom in Madison, but I work from home in Janesville, as most of, probably at least 60% of our company has transitioned to full-time work from home. So I'm in Janesville, but I work for a Madison company. My first exposure to Tableau was my first day on the job with TDS Telecom. Had not used it prior to that, but I love the tool. I love the visualizations that we can build with it. I love its functionality. I love everything about it. So my first shot at being, or my first time, I should say, as being a leader, and I'm looking forward to everything that we're going to bring to the group in the coming months.
Awesome. Yeah, we're thrilled to have the stream team put together, and feel free to reach out to any of us. This is your Tableau user group, and reach out and let us know if there's particular topics that you're interested in hearing about, or if you want to raise your hand to present. That's our priority for presenters, is to source them from Wisconsin. So we'd love to hear about it, and it doesn't have to be a rocket science topic. For beginner one-on-one topics are more than welcome and actually preferred because that's of interest to the broader community. All right, with that, let's take a look at our agenda. We're kicking things off, and Tammy's going to do a fun little audience profile next to give us a chance to get to know who's with us today in this online environment. And then Jen and Dr. Rob are going to share some newish features in Tableau that you may or may not be aware of. And then Brandi is going to share Tableau tips for enterprise collaboration. So looking forward to that. And please participate in the chat and Q&A. So this is a webinar. So we have a special Q&A functionality that works best for asking questions, in part because you can upvote the questions. So if somebody asks a question and you're like, yeah, I want to hear the answer to that, you can simply upvote it, and we can helps us monitor that. All right, and then Robert is paying attention to who participates. So we want you to participate today, and at the end he's gonna randomly choose some participants based on your participation. So raise your hand, participate in the chat. Looking forward to communicating with everyone. All right, time for the audience profile. So we've got a QR code here as well as a URL down below that you can navigate to participate in this poll. Tammy, what all do you have in store for us here?
All kinds of fun questions, all kinds of fun questions. So first we're gonna find out where you're from, and then we're gonna talk about some of our New Year's resolutions and whatnot. And then we're gonna find out your level of experience with some of the topics that are being talked about today. So all kinds of fun stuff.
All right, and here we go. First question.
All right, the first question, where are you joining us from? So are you more from Southern Wisconsin, so the Madison area, the Milwaukee area, way up north, out west, another US state, or outside of the United States? Looks like
Close race.
Yeah, close race between Madison and Milwaukee. Few from Western Wisconsin, no one from up north. Maybe they're all frozen in. All right, I think we can probably move on. So welcome to everyone. Next question, did you make any New Year's resolutions? You made a diet related one, work-life balance related, health and fitness related. You didn't because you never stick to them, or you didn't because you just never do. You never do make a resolution. So lots of health and fitness related, and the nevers, the health and fitness and the nevers are reaching for the finish line here. All right, I think we can move on. What is your favorite winter activity or activities? This one is a multiple choice: skiing, sledding, ice fishing, binge watching Netflix. I usually do that with a kitty in my lap. Or forget about this winter stuff, I'm going to plan my summer vacation. Looks like a lot of people are thinking about the summer. Some sledding, binge watching Netflix. So not wanting to be outside. That's fair enough. That's me all the way. Okay, next question. What version of Tableau Desktop are you using? If you don't have Tableau yet and you're just here to see what Tableau is all about, or 2022.4, which is the newest, a different version of 2022, 2021, 2020, 2019, or you don't know. So it looks like just about everybody is on a fairly recent version. So that's good. That's good. All right. Next question. This is, and I thought about putting a both on here, but I'm making you pick one. Should data be singular or plural? Overwhelmingly plural so far. A few singulars, but mostly plurals. Looks like plural is the overwhelming winner on this one. Singular's trying to make a push for it. Looks like plural wins the race on this one. Next question. How familiar are you with dynamic zone visibility? So something we're going to see today. You've used it extensively. You know what it is, but you've never tried it. I've heard of it, but I don't know much about it. What is it? So what is it would be, I've never even heard of it. So quite a few people have never heard of dynamic zone visibility. So that'll be an exciting presentation for us today then. Awesome. One person has used it extensively. So I know what it is, but I've never tried it. So I'm excited to see what it can do. All right, next question. When I have to replace a data source in Tableau workbook, I will read the response on your phone. You can probably see the whole thing. I do it like a rock star. I mess up my dashboard beyond recognition. I am scared to try, so I just make another workbook, or I can replace a data source. So quite a few people are rock stars at replacing data sources. Some are afraid to try. We've got a few that are afraid. And some, like when I first got started with Tableau, mess up my dashboard beyond recognition. And that's really frustrating. I feel that. And we have a couple that didn't know we could replace the data source. So good information coming on that. Next question. Do you have the Tableau Data Management add-on? Yes or no? Or what is the Tableau Data Management add-on? So if you don't know what it is, choose option number 3. Oh, exciting. We have quite a few people who don't even know what it is. So we will have a presentation on that. So that should be an exciting thing to learn about as well. And next question. Do you have a checklist of elements that your dashboard should have to conform to company guidelines like color, fonts, layouts, etc.? Yes, we like the design of our dashboards to be consistent. Yes, but no one follows it. No, we are free to do whatever we want. Or no, but we should. Our dashboards need to be more consistent. Looks like we have an overwhelming majority that have guidelines to follow. So that's good. So it's frustrating when we have guidelines and no one follows them. For sure that's frustrating. So awesome. That's our poll for this time. Thank you so much for participating.
Nice job, Tammy.
Thank
Thanks
you
for doing that.
Yep.
Yeah, it looks like we're aligned pretty well with the background of the audience and some of our topics today. So perfect. So our first speakers today are Jen Shepard and Dr. Rob to share some of those things. And we're going to start off with dynamic zone visibility. Take it away, Jen.
Thanks, Pat. Although actually I'm doing it in the opposite order. So we'll get to the dynamic zone visibility in just a minute. So I'm covering 2 of the latest within the last year features that I use a lot in my work, or rather one I use a lot, the other I'm just starting to explore how awesome it is. I really want to talk to that person who said they use dynamic zone visibility extensively, because I bet you've got some great ideas. But the 2 I want to talk about are viewing underlying data and then dynamic zone visibility. So this one came out in 2022.1, or rather they enhanced it in 2022.1. And it's not just a cosmetic change. So you may notice the cosmetic change initially. So before 2022.1, it looked like this table on the left when you looked at your underlying data. And that's whether you looked at a data point, looked at your whole sheet, or even looked at your data source underlying data, which I'll show you in Tableau in just a minute. And then in 2022.1, they completely rebuilt it. I heard directly from one of the Tableau product managers that this was a complete rebuild. They didn't just make some enhancements to this, they redid the way it was created, which I think is what led to some of my complaints about this new feature. So I'll show you these in Tableau, like I said, but one thing to point out right away is that the different data sources, if you have more than one sheet being used, that used to be along the bottom and now it's along the left over here. So that's something to get used to, of just where you're looking at on the screen. And then the other thing I wanted to share with you is just a couple of the things that are new, some of the things that didn't change, and then in my opinion, 2 things that got lost in the rebuild that I really think they should have prioritized, and hopefully they will bring back. So first we'll start with the good news. Some things you used to be able to do that you still can, in case that was important to you. You can still move columns around in your data view. I'll show you that in just a second. You can still sort data within a column. I find this really helpful. The main way I use these view underlying data is to maybe check the grain of the data. If it's a data source I haven't worked with before, haven't worked with in a while, or just to confirm that I'm going to be using the right level of detail. I also will use it to do data validation. So if I build out a view, maybe I've got a couple of different fields in there and I want to dig into the underlying data for one of my marks, I'll do this underlying data to get a more nuanced view of it. So this is how I use it. So sorting data in a column can be really useful. You can, and still can, always could, show all of the fields that are in your data source. So that sometimes can be very overwhelming if you have a lot of data fields. You can export the data from that data view, and you can look at your aliases versus the original field name. So all of that stays the same. What they've added is the ability to only look at particular fields, which is super helpful if you are one of those people with a whole lot of columns in your data and you don't need to see all of them. You've got your maybe 5 or 6 that you want to focus on. So what I used to have to do is bring fields out into the detail shelf or in the tooltip or something just to make them appear in my underlying data window so that I could see what I needed to see without having to look at everything. But now you can just pick and choose. I'll show you that in just a second. And you can also move multiple columns at a time. So you always have been able to move one column. Maybe you want something all the way to the left. Now you can maybe bring 2 or 3 or however many you want and reorder them. And then Tableau says that when you export the data, it will actually take those customizations that you made in terms of sorting and what order things are in and bring that into your export, which is really great. So let's take a quick look at that in Tableau. This is a view you're going to see in just a minute here. So I just picked one particular mark and I right-clicked it and said, here, I'll do that more slowly. So I right-clicked on this mark and I chose view data here. And so now it's going to show me the underlying data for just this mark. So if I click on the left instead of the bottom, so that's the big change, and look at full data, it gives me all these different fields. But if you click the show fields button, that's where you can turn on and off different fields in your view. So maybe I don't care about these ones right now, and it's dynamically adjusting those as I select. And so I can get this down to only be the things I want to see. And I can just grab all of these if I want and move them. Oops, I grabbed too many. Grab maybe these 3, maybe I want to move those over. There we go. So you can just shift things around. You can do control and grab 2 things at once and push those to the end. So you can get that arranged the way you like it. Now here's the cautionary tale. Make sure you do all of that in one go, because if you close this window and come back, you got to start all over again. So that's kind of annoying. And then the other thing that I find really frustrating is there's no way to make this bigger except by dragging it. So in the old version of Tableau, same thing, right? Click a data point, view data, there's this maximize button. So I can pop this thing to take out my full screen if I want. I can minimize it, I can drag it, but it has the maximize. But in the newer versions of Tableau, that's not true anymore. Like I said, I think they just kind of overlooked that when they were rebuilding this out. And I have already created an idea. I'll pop that in the chat in a little bit. And if you want to go upvote my idea to have them add that maximize button back in there, that would be great. The other thing you can't do anymore that I found super helpful when I would validate data is, say I have all this data in here and I want to see what this value looks like all the way across. So I can click it and the whole row highlights, and then I can scroll over, look at my other fields. I can go back and forth, and I know which record I was looking at. You can't do that anymore. So I only have one data point here, but if let's see here. If I just look at my whole data source, and if I wanted to click this, I can only click in one cell at a time. And I've got to drag to make this bigger because I don't have my maximize. So on the whole, I think the changes they made are really good, and I'm definitely getting value, especially out of the show fields thing. But I really miss being able to highlight a row, and I really miss being able to maximize. So if you would want to support my efforts to get them to fix that, that would be fantastic. But that's really all I wanted to share with you about the new underlying data view. The other thing I'll just point out here is that aliases used to be visible all the time. And now it's hidden under this little settings menu. It's right now the only setting, which leads me to believe probably more settings will be added to this at some point. But as of now, only the show aliases is down there under that little gear wheel. Previously, it was right here at the top, and you could just uncheck to show aliases. So if you're looking for that, that's where you find it. All right, let us now move into the more exciting topic of dynamic zone visibility. So this one is more recent. This just came out in 2022.3. And oh my gosh, you guys, this is one of the most exciting features they've released in quite some time. As I said earlier, I've started using it, but I have really just started scratching the surface of what it can do. So I'm going to show you a couple of examples. I think a good way to get excited about a new feature is to see it in use. So I've got several here that we'll take a quick look at. I will happily share these slides afterwards so that you can take a closer look as well and really dig in and get excited about the feature. Basically, what it does is it lets you decide what things should show on a dashboard and which things shouldn't based on something the user interacts with. So this example is looking at an executive summary, and you see these little toggle buttons. So these are custom buttons that this creator, Pradeep Kumarji, created. And if you click on it, it pops open these filters. So you can hide them, tuck them away if you want, show them when you do. And yeah, there were other ways to do this before. So you could have used the show hide container that has been around for a couple of versions, but you'll see with some of these other examples, there's things that you can do now with the dynamic zone visibility that weren't as easy to do before. Same here, legends on, legends off. And then down here, this one is a more sophisticated view. So here you can add this additional column to your view. So now we can show the calculated % change if we want to, or we can just toggle that off and it goes away. And that's all dynamic zone visibility. Pretty cool. Sam Parsons, he was in Iron Viz last year, so you probably know his name, also did a lot of great work. So he did I guess maybe more what Tableau might have been envisioning with dynamic zone. So he used it to show entire views and turn them on and take them off. And he's got these little icons here. If I click on that, it's going to zoom into that view, but really it's just dynamically showing this view because I clicked on something. Or I can dynamically collapse that back. I can zoom in on this one. It's really nice for cases like this where maybe when your chart is small, it's hard to see exactly what that pattern is or read those legends are kind of tiny. This way you can let your user zoom in on a chart, get the maximum view out of that. So see the axes more clearly, see labels, that kind of thing, but then put it back in the context of the overall dashboard when they don't need that detail. So I'm not going to click on all of these. You can play with those on your own afterward. You probably are all pretty familiar, or if you've been using Tableau for a while, you've probably heard of Ryan Sleeper and know about Playfair Data. They do a lot of training and consulting. So Ryan's got a whole blog out about how to do sheet swapping with dynamic zone visibility. And then in this particular case, not only does he swap between the national view versus statewide, but he uses a lot of parameter actions to make this seamless for the user. So all the user has to do is click a state. Of course, we're going to click on Wisconsin, and now I get the Wisconsin view. And then this is just an example, so there's not a lot of detail there. You click any city to get back out, and I'm back to the national view again. So these two things are sharing one space, but not in the awkward way with all the containers and things that we had to do before with sheet swapping. So that one's pretty cool too. And then one last one I'll show you for now, and then we'll talk a little more about how do you do this, is this portfolio dashboard. So this is from Finn Charlton. So there's a trend line for a couple of different stocks up here. We've got an overall trend below. A lot of things actually happening here. So this is a hover action. So if I hover over any one of these, it shows me the trend for that versus the others. And then if I click on it anywhere in here, then these two new charts related to that particular stock show up at the bottom. And that's with dynamic zone visibility. So these weren't here before. It's clicking on this chart that made those appear. Or same, if I click on another one over here, it switches to that. And if I click out of here, I get back to that trend line. And if I stop hovering, it goes back to the overall trend. So some pretty cool interactivity in general happening with this dashboard, but it's that dynamic zone that made those two detailed charts pop out. So here are what I see as some of the main benefits for this. Ryan Sleeper talks about this in his blog, which again, I'll share with you all after the meeting. One of them is that you get kind of the same effect as what we used to do with sheet swapping, but there's less setup required. You do still have to have some calculations and do some things with containers to get it organized, but there are fewer steps than there used to be, which is great. And the old container method, depending on how many sheets you had that you were swapping and were sharing space in that container, they each took up a little bit of space. And so if you had enough of them stacked up in there, you might end up where it looked like your views weren't aligned anymore because you'd have empty white space on the end. So that isn't the case anymore. These sheets that are being swapped are completely not rendering on the dashboard until you need them. You can use the sheet titles, which is pretty cool because it's the whole sheet that's appearing and disappearing. And I haven't seen anybody address this. I've tried finding it. If anyone knows the answer to this, please chime in the chat. But it seems to me that if you're not loading that other sheet until the user interacts with it, it seems like probably this would be good for performance too. There was some reference in Tableau Tim's YouTube tutorial that the calculations can be simpler, so that helps with performance, but I have to believe that the rendering is improved as well. But that's just my assumption. I have not seen any official confirmation of that. So in order to actually build these things, you do have a couple of requirements you have to meet. This is directly from Tableau's guide on dynamic zone visibility. So I'll share that link in the PowerPoint too. And then there's this other blog I found where they give a couple of examples of some calculations that meet these criteria, but it's got to just be a true or false option. So it's got to be basically really clear to Tableau when to show it and when not to. And that's why these are all required. So it's got to be a true or false. It can only be a single value, and it can't be dependent on what you're showing, because then it doesn't know, do I show this or do I not? It's got to have this constant value. So that's why a true or false parameter works really well for these. So let me show you an example of this. This isn't my real data, but this is exactly how I did use it in one of my recent visualizations. So you might have encountered a situation kind of like this too, where I've got some data, and in this case, these are fake school data, and I'm looking at various metrics related to these schools. And some of them, a high value is a good thing. So I have things in here like the attendance rate. I've got things like student proficiency. And then some of the things aren't a high value is not a good thing, like student being economically disadvantaged or expulsions and suspensions, not good. And I want to be able to do a sheet swap, or I should say a measure swap with this. So I only have to build the one worksheet. But then the problem is it can be confusing for users to look at a bad thing and a higher value. I think it can just be confusing for people. So dynamic zone visibility is really great in a situation like this because I can just have two versions of my chart, one where a high value is good and one where a high value is bad, and dynamically show the right set based on what my user picks. So I've already set all of this up just in the interest of time, but just for the demo, let's say we have a simple highlight table like this, where I've got all of my different metrics. I made a parameter that lets the user choose them. So those are all the different metrics in my data. I just gave them numerical values because I was in a hurry and did not want to type all of this out again. And to make it simple on myself, I put the two that are reversed, or where a high value is a bad thing, at the end. So I could remember those are 6 and 7. So I've got that parameter. And then I've got my metric calculation that tells Tableau what to do with my parameter. So a case statement referencing it when it's 1, and these are all my measures. So that's easy enough to set that up. And then the dynamic zone visibility part comes in and having the specific calculation that tells it when to show what. And so that's these two calculations here. They're both Boolean. You can see the true false there. So I've got this one that says, if my parameter selection is less than 6, remember my two reversed ones were 6 and 7. So if it's 1 through 5, is it 1 through 5? True or false? And then my other calculation is it the 6 or the 7? So it can only be one of those at a time. It's either the 6 or the 7, or it's less than the 6. So it can't be both of those. So it's a constant value, true or false. So meeting all the criteria for Tableau. And so then to build this out on the dashboard, I just put, I'll just trying to think of the best way to show you this. I basically have two vertical containers. And in one set, I've got the non-reverse version of my sheet with its legend. So let me show you that a little more clearly here. So here's my heat map, highlight table, whatever you want to call it. Here's my legend where the blue value is the good value, the high value. And then I just copied the sheet And I just reversed my legend so that a blue value is on the low side, a red value is a high value. And I'm going to use this one for my 2 metrics where a high value is a bad thing. And so then what I did on the dashboard is I built a container and I put my sheet with its legend in one container and I put the other sheet with its legend in the other container. So let me show you this container. So right now I'm looking at one of my positive metrics. And if you go to the layout portion of the dashboard, there's this new thing here. It says control visibility using value. It doesn't say dynamic zone visibility. So that's a little confusing that the way we refer to it is not what you'll actually see on the dashboard, but that's where it is. Control visibility using value. So I clicked that, checked it, and then I had to tell it one of my 2 calculations, the ones I just showed you. So my non-reversed version gets this is less than 6. And when that is true, I want it to show this container. And then when I pick one of my others, we'll pick the 7 value, I have the same thing in this container. This whole container, I put my other worksheet and its legend in here. And I said the same thing, control visibility, this time using my other calculation when it's the 6 or the 7. And so seamlessly then, Tableau is only showing one container at a time. So if I switch this back to one of my positive values, the other container comes in with the legend where the blue is the high value. If I pick one of my reverse scores, the other container shows up where the blue is the low value. The user has no idea that I've got these 2 sheets here and that this is all happening. It's just beautiful and seamless, but it really is helpful in a situation like this where I want it to be a single selector for my user, but I don't want them to be confused by when the legend is reversed. So this can work for other things where maybe you've got, trying to think of another good example. We'll just leave it at that. I think it works really great in situations like this where semantically a high value is good in some cases and a high value is bad in others. I can just flip-flop that legend without confusing people and it works beautifully. So that's one way I've been using it. I would love to hear from you all in the chat how you're using this or how you think you might use it. The last thing I will share with you is just a couple of other use cases. So I'll share these links out with you so you can look into this. But in this one, what they did is they float everything on their dashboard, and then they use a parameter to let the user show light mode or dark mode, which decides whether a light colored container shows up in the background or a dark one. So then the dashboard looks like the whole mode has been changed. So a lot easier than having 2 separate dashboards. You just have one and you just control the background color. So that's a pretty cool use case. This one, Lindsay Betzendahl just got Visit of the Day for this calendar view, which is pretty cool. She did a calendar of her personal life and things she's supposed to do, but she's got this dynamic zone visibility thing happening here where she's got kind of these extra parameters show up and just turn them back off again. So a lot of people are using it for that type of use case. And then Luke Stanky, you might know that name as well. He is a powerful figure in the Tableau community with all the cool stuff that he does. So he built this view where you've got this basic table about your customers. This is Superstore. And if you click on one of them, it dynamically pops open a whole new view right in line with the table. Except it's not wanting to do that for me. We'll try a different one. I swear this works. I did it yesterday. Oh, come on now. Well, I guess you'll have to look that one on your own. It was opening up a whole other box. There was a map, there was another chart just specific to that customer, and it pushed all the customers below it. I have no idea why this isn't rendering. Well, it pushed all the other customers down, so it still preserved the ordering. And then when I clicked off it, it just collapsed them again. So that's unfortunate that that's not working right now. It's for you to see that. It was pretty cool. But those are some other ways that you could use this feature. So really exciting stuff. I think, like I said, it's one of the best new things they've released in a while. It's really great for saving space on your dashboard if you want to show some things and not others without all the clutter and hassle of the old way of doing sheet swapping. So feel free to post some questions about that in the chat, and I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Rob now.
Just one question so far, Jen, and that is how do they upvote your idea? So
yes, please do. I'm going to pop that in the chat right now. So if you want to multitask a little bit or just have it open for after the meeting, that would be marvelous.
And all of these speakers are seasoned Tableau pros. So please challenge them a little bit with some questions. And again, this is a webinar format, so please use the Q&A feature, but otherwise, please participate in the chat with other commentary. Paula has a question. Do all the sheets need to be in the same container? What do you think, Jen?
Yes, I do believe they will need to be well, they don't have to be in a container. I just think it works best to do that. You can show hide things that aren't in a container, but if you've got multiple things that relate to each other, I find it easiest to just do it that way. Otherwise, you'd have to do one thing at a time, which would just make more work for yourself. So in my example here, where I've got the sheet plus the legend, I definitely wanted those in a container so I could just do the whole container, but you don't have to have a container, is my understanding.
Thank you.
Yeah.
All right, Dr. Rob, take it away.
Great, thank you, Jen. That was really great stuff. Is my Tableau workbook showing?
Yes.
Great. So we're going to talk about a couple different things today, new features in Tableau, and the first one is one that just came out, I believe, in the last 2022.4. Look at my cheat sheet. It was mentioned earlier that it's really tough to change data sources. So I started with sheet 1, great name here. You see it's UDM monthly, understanding dairy markets. I have sheet 2 or 1 sub 2, which I simply right-clicked on it and duplicated the sheet. So the two are identical. If I wanted to change the data source in just one of these, there is a way to do it today, and I'll give you the 30-second overview on that for those who can't upgrade to the latest version of Tableau right now. What you do is right-click on the sheet, choose copy, open up a new Tableau workbook, paste it in there. It will bring the data source with it, change the data source there, come back over here, delete the sheet, go into the new workbook with the new data source, copy it there, paste it in here, it'll bring the new data source with it. It's a lot of work and a lot of steps and baggage to do things. What I'd really like to be able to do is go into this second sheet, and I want to change from monthly to weekly. And just to make sure that we know things are happening, I created a title up here, which is just the data source name for the sheet. We see the Federal Reserve Board of Governors data is showing up here, which is great because they happen to be meeting today, which is going to affect all of us long term. But when I want to change this in the past, I just come up to the top, right click and choose replace data source. And I can see monthly is the current source. I want to use weekly as a new source. There's a new option that shows up here to replace current worksheet only. So as I click on that and say, okay, I now see I have weekly data. I still have Board of Governors up here. I'm seeing some Italian cheese information, some CME data. My title has changed because my data source is different. When I go back to the first sheet that I had copied, I'm still looking at monthly. So the data source did only change for the one worksheet. Again, if you wanted to do that, just right click on the data source, choose replace data source and replace current worksheet only. If you need to replace it in several worksheets, you'll have to do this several times, but it avoids having to pull things in and out or replace it universally. Another nice new feature that might not get a lot of use, but might get a little bit of use is proper case. So I just created a spreadsheet and keyed in some names, and I highlighted this one. So this one's really not a name. This is more of a SQL convention or programming a proper case test. And as Tableau is looking at a new function called proper, it allows you to put things into proper case. It works really well for names. It's not going to work for this type of proper case. So all I did is created a new calculated column, and everything's on the wrong screen. We'll edit things here. And very simple, it's the function proper and any string. If I then add that to my visualization here to my worksheet, I'll see it's taken Arthur C. Clarke and it's made him into Arthur C. Clarke the way we would expect it. The same with these other names. No matter how you spell them or capitalize them, it seems to work really well at doing what you expect it to do and changing names to a proper case. It does not work with things for programming names. So if you have proper case text, it's going to say, hey, this is all this one big long name. Let's leave the first letter capitalized and get rid of the rest. So it does have some functionality. It's this one, a feature, string feature, they kind of squeaked in there that you may or may not have noticed. The third thing I wanted to talk about is something that's available to those who are using Tableau Server and publishing. This is published online to our local Tableau Server here. There's a new icon at the top that says Explore Data. When I click on Explore Data, it's going to tell me a little bit about my data. This is really handy for users who want a quick look and want to know what's going on. You can ask it about applied filters, and here we're filtering on an area name. So those happen to be states in this case. Tells us a little bit about data and a summary of the data. It also tells us that there are no outliers found. And if I go just to Wisconsin, look at milk production data in Wisconsin, suddenly I'm seeing that it is telling me there's some outliers. And as I hover over these, you're going to see on the left-hand side of the screen, it's highlighting the month and the data point. At this point, it's November, so this little green dot had just turned on as I highlighted over November here, saying, these look like outliers to Tableau. As we look at the data, they're not really outliers, they're just older data. And milk production grew very quickly in Wisconsin, starting in the early 20-teens, 2014, 15, 16, we started to see milk production grow there. Same type of thing as we look at, just grab another one here, world milk production. Again, you can explore the data. We can see filters that are applied here. It's telling us there are no filters here. There's nothing exposed to the user, nothing they can do. One nice thing here is it does show us parameters, not a useful parameter for the user in this case, because it's just to draw a zero line on the chart. But in other visualizations where users do have a lot of parameters they're working with, it helps them understand what those parameters are without a call back to the IT build desk or into the business intelligence department. Also lets them see what data is on the available as this report was built. Probably not something you're going to use a lot as you're developing Tableau reports, because in Tableau Desktop you have a lot more access, as you can see a lot more. But it does help users as they're exploring things just to understand what's there and where data is coming from. So again, just a quick look at a couple new features that are out there. One of the things that we really enjoy at Brandi about Tableau is that they are continually responding with new features, and they do respond well to the user community. So if there's something you don't see, you don't want, post some questions about it on the Tableau forums. Ask other users, maybe it already exists. I usually find out when I'm looking for something that it already exists, I just don't know about it. But if it doesn't work as expected, Tableau seems to be very responsive to users reaching out saying, this is something I'd like to see and like to see done. And with that, we'll turn it back over to Patrick so we can hear from Brandi about more exciting new stuff.
Well, hold on, we got lots of questions coming in now.
Oh, great.
But well done as usual. So Bruce has a couple of questions. His first question is there a way to duplicate a data source in a workbook? For example, I want to copy an existing data source, then modify while retaining the original data source.
I'm not really sure. Yes, think about this. Someone years ago, early in the Microsoft Windows world, said right-click everywhere. So I just right-clicked on UDM Monthly, and I'm going to choose duplicate, and I'm hoping it shows up with another data source here. And there's a copy of it. So yes, you can just right-click on a data source, duplicate. Now we have a second data source, and I can do things with this one that will be independent of the first.
Wonderful. And while we're on questions from Bruce, the next one is, what version of Tableau has the data guide button on Tableau Server? All right, so he did. Data guide is 2022.3. Data guide appears. So if you're publishing to Tableau online, it just appeared because that's always up to date. Otherwise, Tableau Server, you need 2022.3. So their approach is to, like you said, deploy new features to Tableau Cloud continuously, and then Tableau Server secondarily, and with 2 major releases a year. All right. Next question from Cheng. For that proper case function, if one cell doesn't turn out to be what you need, can you manually fix it?
There are probably a couple different ways to do that. And, the example is up here is a proper case text. I mean, you could just write a more complicated formula. And I'm not sure how you'd want to do that. It all depends on your data. You know, very much the way you would have done it in the past, to where you start looking at substrings and breaking things apart.
So it would
Yeah.
involve getting more specific coding.
It would, and you know, kind of like I have the little orange dot that shows up here because of color.
Mhm.
And where is my color? Oh, because I'm not on the right data source. Yeah. Again, a really simple formula. Come here. We can edit this. And this I said, you know, if test string is proper test case, then highlight it. So you could incorporate that type of logic if you know what they are ahead of time. If you don't, I mean, you could write some sort of a test to ask basic questions of yourself and guide it that way, and then use proper versus some other function. But there's probably no great way to do that.
Mhm. All right, next question from Jimmy. Is that new
I'm just-
functionality?
Sorry,
Oh,
just gonna
Robert?
interject. I typed this into the answer there. You can use the proper function, you write the calculation for it, and then you'll get what you get. And then if you don't like a particular result, you can use the aliases for that dimension. So if you right click, you can alias what you don't agree with to be something else.
That's
Okay.
a great idea.
Thanks, Robert.
You bet.
Yeah, the next one from Jimmy, is that new functionality going to show the data source for everyone, or is it something that is user selected as an on-off setting?
Data functionality. Now maybe I'm missing something here. So I talked about being able to swap data sources. So if I wanted to replace the data source in this case.
My guess is they're talking about the data guide.
Yeah,
Aha.
data guide or ask data.
It's going to be something in this case. I can turn the data guide on or off, so I'm going to see it as a user.
I think though you have to be logged onto the server. I don't think that this is something, I don't know for sure, but I don't recall seeing anything that's going to show up if you've embedded it into a web page. You actually have to have the toolbar that you see there that's enabled. I think that has to be something that you're on the server. Not positive.
And that would make sense because it is dynamically building this, you know, no outliers found. If I go back to the other sheet, wherever I was to do, as I click on different sheets, it's now looking for outliers and then either finding or not finding them on each different worksheet within the dashboard. So it's round tripping back to the server to do this.
Very good. And I see, oh, Bruce has another question. Which version of Tableau has the new feature to swap the data source for just one view?
Yep,
I
and that's 2022.4. So that's a
Yep.
really recent one.
So it looks like Bruce needs to upgrade. He's on 22.1.
And
Alrighty.
I'm not sure, but one thing you might want to try if you are using Tableau Online or Tableau Cloud as a server, you can probably come out here, click on edit your workbook here, swap the data sources the way you wanted to, save it, and then if you reload it in desktop, it'll be there. I have not found any problems with changing things, which actually create a newer version of the workbook on a server and then bring it back into desktop. That was a problem in the past, but it doesn't seem to hurt anything today. I'm not sure how newer functions would work if you try to pull them into an existing desktop version.
That's a good option. And I see Jen took care of the other question in the Q&A. So I think we're ready to move on to our next speaker. Thanks very much for those sharing those newish features, Dr. Rob and Jen. Next up, our very own Brandi Beals. Take it away, Brandi.
Thank you. All right. I'm going to share our screen here. Okay. I Thanks so much for having me. I mean, those are some really awesome features that were shared. And those are all obviously all kind of like new-ish Tableau features that have been released in the last year or so. I'm kind of bringing it back to basics, I suppose, and thinking about, some of the things that I've found in my 12 years of using Tableau that really help like a team or people within an organization collaborate on Tableau stuff, right? And I'll get to the agenda in just a little bit, but ultimately my goal here is to kind of give some maybe simple steps or simple tips that you could potentially incorporate throughout the development lifecycle that sets yourself, your team, your end users, your company up for success when using Tableau. So before I kind of get into the agenda, I was just going to mention a little bit more about myself. I'm here in all of the user group meetings. I'm part of the Milwaukee Tableau user group leadership team, Wisconsin as well. And through my efforts there, I'm a Tableau ambassador. If that wasn't enough, I also run something called the Data Book Club and something called the Data Careers Summit, because apparently data is also my hobby. But those are all things that I do with my free time. During kind of the regular day, I do have a full-time job as a data analytics manager. And part of that includes being a Tableau admin and kind of running our like center of practice or center of excellence. So that's a little bit more about me that you might not really know. And I do have, I'm mentioning this only, sorry, Tammy, to call you out, but Tammy didn't even know that I had a website and a blog, so I clearly don't talk about it very much, but I do have a website, brandibeals.com. I try to write a blog once a month, and I try to focus on kind of two things. One being, how to maybe create your community and ideas for, starting a Tableau user group or just like ways to, kind of bring people together and craft interesting content, but then also underutilized Tableau features or Tableau Server things. There are so many awesome people out there who create really cool charts in Tableau. I'm not really one of those people. I'm more about like the practical application of Tableau, specifically within an organization. And so I really love Tableau Server for that reason. So anyway, that's a little bit more about me if you didn't already know. But let's dive into what I'm going to cover today. So I realize I have less than a half hour. So we've got a lot of things to cover, which is great, really exciting. And you guys asked so many good questions of our first speakers today. So I do have a lot to cover. There's 12 different tips here. I've kind of grouped them into these kind of categories. So we're going to start with really what you can do before you even start building something in Tableau, just things that I've tried to incorporate in my work that helps me out in the long run. Then we have like, what can you do when you're actually building something in Tableau Desktop to make it easier for you to support this thing later on, or for your team to support, this dashboard in 3 months from now when a change request is kind of being made. So we're going to talk about that. And then we're going to move to Tableau Server or Tableau Cloud, if that's the platform you might have. And we're going to talk about ways that you can use some automation capabilities that come out of the box. But then there are some things that come with the Tableau data management add-on. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about that as well, because it might be valuable for you. And based on the poll that Tammy put together earlier, I know there's a lot of people don't even know what the Tableau data management add-on is. So I'm going to talk about that. And then there's a whole group, a category called metadata, which is like after the fact, after you've created your dashboard, after you've shared your dashboard, and you've maybe automated some things off of your dashboard, the metadata is information about that usage, about how it's being used, and how you can kind of use that information to inform any iterations. So that's generally my plan. We'll see how much we can accomplish. And okay. So why, just briefly kind of why we might be interested in these things, taking that next, step and kind of layering in these extra components, really, having better support, better documentation, makes it easier to support the creations that you've built. If you're like me, and maybe you struggle with delegation, taking that extra step makes it easier for other people on your team or other people within the organization to support that thing, that dashboard that you've created. Additionally, a lot of the things that you're going to see along the way today will benefit your end users, the people that you're building this dashboard for, providing them transparency into what you've done in order to be able to self-serve and answer their own questions that they might have about the dashboard and the data that you're showing. So that's what we're going to cover. So let's dive into kind of the first item. So before we even get to Tableau, one of my top tips, one of the things I set up years ago, and I still use it every time I use Tableau, is our branded color palette. And so again, this was something Tammy asked about in the poll at the start of the meeting, is whether you have a corporate style guide or a color, like branding guidelines, or whatever it is. When you're able to layer that stuff into your Tableau development, it brings an additional level of trust to your data and to the analysis that you've conducted. And it might just feel sometimes like, okay, I'm just making it pretty, or I'm just making it, look like our company, brand. But when you've taken that extra step, it shows the care that you've put into your dashboard, which, one might then assume that you've taken that same care to get the data from the right source, to validate the data that you're showing and things of that nature. So taking that extra step, I find to be very valuable. And so we're going to start even outside of Tableau. So in Windows Explorer, if you go to Documents, there's a folder here called My Tableau Repository. And in this folder is a preferences file. And this preferences.tps file is something that you can just edit in Notepad. So we're going to open this up with Notepad, and you can customize this with some color palettes. So here I've created a color palette with these colors. And so these are all like hex codes. So you can just kind of, most marketing departments might have a hex code related to your company colors, or you can even use a color picker in well, really many websites are out there, but also in like PowerPoint, you could just use a color picker to pick up what that hex code is, and then you can name your color palette as well. So once you've set this up, you can save this preferences file, and it then becomes available for use in Tableau Desktop. So that's kind of tip number one. Let's jump over now to Tableau Desktop. And the next tip I guess I have before even starting to build anything is, so here you can see I've already connected to some data sets, but I like to go to Format and Workbook. And here I like to set my fonts, both what type of font I'm using, what color that is, and then the size of the font. So this is for the text that is on the worksheets, text that's in the tooltips, the title of the different worksheets, and then dashboard titles. I also hate grid lines, so I always turn them off. That's just a matter of personal preference. So I like to do this first step of formatting right away in order to avoid a lot of rework later. What I will say though is I don't like to do all my formatting up front. So I just like to do this first. I like to, then start to just explore my data, build the visualizations I really like that I think are valuable and insightful. And what I'll get to later is putting them all onto a dashboard, and then at that time, kind of doing the final set of formatting. So often when I first started using Tableau, I would spend so much time formatting individual charts right up front, just to have to reformat them once I put them into a dashboard. So this is as far as I take formatting initially, because the type of font that you're using or the size of it does change, maybe how you build your chart. But then, yeah, kind of putting the finishing touches on your formatting later on. So that's really tip 2. We're getting through these. Well, it seems fast, but we have more complex ones coming up shortly. The last tip I have for the setup. So clearly you see I have 4 data sources set up here. These data sources are relatively, they only have a few fields in them. But so this was particularly easy, this next tip, but I understand it's not quite as easy with some data sources that have hundreds of fields. But I really like to define where it makes sense. I like to add a definition to the field. And so here, when I'm hovering over this activity category field, I can see that there's a little description that pops up. And this really helps, other people who are looking to use this data source, right? Let's have a common way that we refer to these fields, or, having that definition, especially if there's caveats. Maybe you don't need to do it for every field, or fields where there's maybe, it's just kind of common knowledge. But if there's any caveats associated with that particular field, it might be helpful to add a comment. So here on this field, it says, this is the month and year when the activity ended. And if the activity is ongoing, the word present is returned. So in order to add this comment, if you will, or this description, you can right click, go to default properties and go to comment. And then you get this text box that pops up, and you can just type in here like you normally would. And so the benefit of kind of taking that extra time to define your fields, or at the very least define the more complex ones, is again to document business logic, to create that common terminology or understanding, and just remove any ambiguity that there might be around what this field does or what it contains. The other kind of tip that goes kind of hand in hand with that is to also add comments to any calculated fields that you're creating during development. So in this case, on that same field, I'm going to right click and go to edit, and you can use 2 forward slashes to add any comments that you might want to have in your calculations. And I like to do this. There are certain calculations where, again, it's just maybe intuitive, but other times it might be helpful to add some logic, or, I think about it as leaving myself clues. There have been many times where I built something and then a year later I have to go back and I'm like, why did I do it this way? And if I left myself notes, I end up thanking myself for leaving myself little clues. So again, it just kind of provides transparency, and we'll actually see this come up later on. So stay tuned for that. Okay, so we are now in the dev portion of these kind of tips. So the next one, even though we haven't built anything yet, the next tip is to kind of continue to leave ourselves notes, except in this case, it's no longer based on the different fields in the data, but it's based on the sheets that we're creating. And so what I'm going to show, if we pop over to just one of these sheets I've already created, if you right click in this kind of gray background area, there are cards. So things like the title card, which is you know, what creates the title for your worksheet. And then in this case, I've turned on the caption card, which is this box that's down here. And essentially by default, what this is Tableau's automatic description of the chart that you've built. It talks about the fields that you've used, if you have any filters applied, what measures you're using and how they're being aggregated. And I've never once found it helpful. Sorry. I'm sure that there are scenarios where it is helpful, but my guess is those are very basic charts, in which case they're probably self-explanatory already. So I've decided to repurpose the caption card, and instead I use it to leave myself little notes. So this is still the same caption card, but what you can do is double click on it and open up this text editor that's very similar to other text editors in Tableau. And in this case, so by the way, I don't know how to make rounded bar charts. I had to look that up. And so I, left that resource here. This is the article I used to figure out how to make these rounded bar charts or Gantt charts. And then I leave myself a little description, right? And this might be helpful again if I come back to this dashboard a few months down the road and I'm like, okay, how did I do this? Or, what do I need to know in order to support this? I don't fill out the caption card for every sheet, just the ones that are really complex, or again, where I want to leave myself little clues. And especially if I'm working in a team, I've found I like to leave almost like step-by-step instructions right in here about how to update something. As opposed to having to remind people to go out. So some other documentation now just lives right alongside the sheet. So that's kind of my other tip. Use that caption card, or maybe make it useful in some scenarios. Once you have everything set up and you have all of your sheets built and you put everything on a dashboard, I'd be curious to know, if you all do this, but I don't think we have anything official, but in my head, I always have what I call a user experience checklist, which is just okay, do I have a title on the dashboard? Do all the sheets have titles? Are there instructions there? Have I checked the tooltips that they're formatted correctly? Are the dashboard actions working as expected? Things like that. And then just kind of like a bonus, I also make sure I do that next level of formatting. So this is where I'll apply any, Tableau style guide or corporate branding that I want to. In this case, this is a personal project. Obviously, it's my resume. You know what? That's probably not obvious. It's very minimalistic. Anyway, but making sure that I've kind of gone through that checklist, applied any formatting at this layer. So again, I should probably document my user experience checklist, but honestly, I'm sure that there's somebody else out there who has a more robust checklist, but my checklist is the title, the subtitles, instructions, tooltips, dashboard actions, and then style guide. So this just all helps to ensure that your creation is going to function properly. You're thinking about how your audience or your end users are going to be interacting with this. And the instructions in particular help to provide guidance to your end users, because I can't tell you how many times I've showed somebody a dashboard, explained to them how they're going to use it, and then next month when they go to use it, they forgot what I talked to them about. So I like to leave kind of instructions like click here to filter this other sheet or something like that. So that brings us about halfway through, and I'm almost on time, so I might speed it up a little bit more, but especially if we have questions. So I will speed it up a little bit more. Apologies in advance, but those are some of the big ones. let's jump now to Tableau Server. So once we've done our setup, we've done our development, we've published this creation out to Tableau Server. Let's talk about what is next. So in this case, this is Tableau Cloud, but the Tableau Cloud and Tableau Server are almost synonymous. Tableau Server is something that your company hosts on-prem, and they have control over it, and they have control over the version. Tableau Cloud is hosted and managed by Tableau themselves. It's a SaaS product, so software as a service, and it's kind of always on the latest and greatest version. Okay, so as you, well, I don't know if you guys noticed this, but I'm actually going to pop back to Tableau Desktop real quick. You can see this data source here has this little blue icon. And when I hover over it, I can see that this is a data quality warning. And this says that this data source is under maintenance. And I even have a little note here that says, please be advised that this data source is being refactored by the data management team. Now, I will say I am the data management team for this particular data source, but it's meant to show you what's possible with a data quality warning. So you set a data quality warning in Tableau Server or in Tableau Cloud, but it still shows up when you're connecting to that data source from Tableau Desktop, which I think is really cool. So we're going to jump over to this events data source. And you can see here, we see that same under maintenance data quality warning, and I'm going to show you how to set that up. So when you've navigated to a data source, so this has to be a published data source, you can click on these three dots and you can go to data quality warning. And there's two types of warnings. One is the quality warning. So this is going to be something you set manually. There's a few different types of quality warnings you can set. Standard visibility is just kind of, you kind of have to be using the data set or looking at the data source to see it. High visibility means that a notification appears when somebody is navigated to the workbook or even gets a subscription. And then here you can see my beautiful message. So that's one data quality warning. The other type of warning is an extract refresh. So this is automatic. So if you have a refresh set up, an extract refresh schedule for this data source to refresh every morning at 8 a.m., for example, and if it fails, then this warning will automatically be added to your now kind of like stale or out of date data source until obviously you fix that issue. So this is a really, really cool feature. This one only comes with the Tableau Data Management add-on. So that is an additional cost in addition to your Tableau Server or Tableau Cloud license. You pay for the data management add-on. That data management add-on comes with two things. The first is Tableau Prep Conductor, which allows you to schedule Tableau Prep workflows, like flows rather. And then the other is Tableau Catalog, which is what gives you this ability. So it's pretty cool because it notifies your end users of any data quality issues. You can communicate those changes to your data source, or like, you know, you can also use it, to communicate changes to your data source. So let's say you're going to end up, you know, getting rid of this data source in lieu of a newer version of it, for example, you can kind of post a notice, if you will. So really cool things. For the sake of time, I'm going to skip custom views and subscriptions. I'll just mention real quick, if you don't already know about subscriptions, when you are on a dashboard, you can click this watch button if you're in Tableau Cloud, or sometimes there's just a subscribe button right up here, and you can set up a subscription right up here. And a subscription essentially just emails you a snapshot of that dashboard on a schedule. Alternatively, well, also there's an option to set up a custom view. So let's say, you know, I really only care about events that are from at least 2020. I can set my filter, and then I can actually make this view that I've just customized my default view. This is potentially valuable if you have one dashboard that's serving, maybe salespeople with different regions, for example. You can still have one dashboard, but everybody can have their own custom view. Okay. I'm now going to kind of turn to the metadata section. I'm going to try to do this in just a few minutes because we've got prizes to give away and questions to answer. So one thing, I know Rob mentioned data guide. There's also this data details button. And by clicking that, it also opens this pane on the right. And what this shows me is all sorts of great information about this workbook and its data sources. So here I can see the usage of this dashboard over time, who owns it, when it was last modified, what data sources are in it, when they were last refreshed, and then the fields that are being used on this particular dashboard. And so here you can see that end date or present field that we were kind of looking at in Tableau Desktop. And if I click this, I can see that description I added, as well as the calculation along with, the kind of comments I left in that calculated field. And so all of this information now is available to your end users with the caveat that you have to have the data management add-on. But again, when you take that extra effort of defining your fields or documenting your calculated fields, they can then be made available to your end users to use. So again, that status information is super helpful, as well as just kind of this additional detail. The last thing I'm going to mention is the comment pane. I think this is an underutilized feature, and I've actually written about it, but this button right here will bring up the comment pane where you can actually write a comment on here, the same that you might do if you're in Slack, for example. You can @mention somebody and say, hey, there's an issue with this data source. And then you can click this little button to include a screenshot of the dashboard as of the time of your comment. And so I find this is really helpful. And if your end users are aware of this, they don't have to leave Tableau in order to send you an email or in order to send you a message. They can do it right here. And if they @mention you, Tableau will send you an email with the message. And you can come in here, and so often, I've just, there have been people that I've worked with in the past who will send me a message saying hey, the data's wrong. And I don't know what workbook they're looking at. I don't know what filters they applied. I have no idea what they're talking about. And so if they come in here and they @mention me, I know exactly what workbook they're looking at. And if they click this little button, it includes a snapshot of exactly the filters that they have applied. And so it reduces just a lot of back and forth. So that's the comments. I did not talk about the view usage. You can kind of see that right at the top of our data details. But what I will say is I've written about all of these things. I will link to all of the blog posts that I've kind of documented these different things in as an ongoing reference for you. But of course, as always, this video is being recorded and you can go back and watch it and make YouTube slow down how fast I'm talking. So, so that is all of the tips that I have for today. Thank you so much for letting me come in and talk at you. Hopefully it's been, hopefully there have been a few nuggets here that you've found valuable. Yeah, thank you.
Phenomenal job, Brandi. Always good to get back to some fundamental tips that help us out in our daily lives. We do have a couple questions for you. Paul asks, do you need the data management add-on for the @mentions, or is this included in base Tableau?
@mentions on comments are included out of the box. I will say though, your Tableau Server admin does have the ability to turn off commenting. So if you don't see it, ask them, but yeah, at mentioning somebody, totally possible. I will say though, that the person that you're at mentioning needs to have access to that dashboard. So.
All
That's
good
yeah.
parameters there. Next up, Satya asks, can the modified captions be viewed by users when viewing the dashboard on server?
As long as you have the data management add-on. All of the, oh no, I'm sorry, captions. No, captions are just for people in Tableau Desktop. Now, if you go to do web editing, for example, then the caption would be visible. But yeah, so it's only developer mode, basically.
Good deal. And that is the last of our questions.
Cool.
Brandi, to your statement just about captions, do you know you can include captions in tooltips? It's one of the objects you can insert. Do you know if they show up if you are viewing the dashboard without being in development mode?
That's a really great question. I haven't explored that, but one would assume if you can add it to the tooltip that it would then show up in that end user mode in Tableau Server.
Yeah, it works well for bringing the caption to the user for functional, but it only pops up for the given mark that you hover over. So it's very specific.
Oh, okay. Interesting. Yeah. So, I mean, yeah, I think there's a lot of different ways that you can use captions. Again, at least for me specifically, I haven't had a real need for them. And so I kind of repurposed captions as a way to leave myself and my team notes. Oh, sorry.
That's creative. Good stuff. All righty, that's the end of our Q&A. Thanks for chiming in there, Robert. Taking a look forward, we have 3 events on the calendar coming up in Q1 for you. So in Wisconsin, we have 3 Tableau user groups. This Tableau user group, the Wisconsin one, which is always has been online before it was cool and plan to continue to be online so we can reach you at your convenience. But then we also have the geographic tugs in Milwaukee and Madison that sometimes will opt to get back to in person, but otherwise offer online events as well. And Milwaukee's got an event coming up on February 23rd, and Brandi just I guess she shared some other links specifically about her presentation, but we'll send a recap email with all the links, including how to register for these events. But February 23rd, dashboard actions, beginner to advanced. Anything you want to add about that, Brandi?
Not really. I mean, it's pretty self-explanatory. We're going to cover dashboard actions, and we like to cover them from a beginner's perspective, an intermediate perspective, and a more advanced perspective. So there's a little something for everyone.
Awesome. And that event is going to be online, so you don't need to worry about the weather. February 22nd, you do need to worry about the weather. So we're just in Madison, we're having a happy hour at Cafe Hollander, in person only, as well as our March 22nd event, which is going to be in real life, or IRL. And we're super excited. Findorf is hosting this event. So that's a new space for us. It's right downtown. I haven't been there yet, but I'm told it's got a great theater environment, kind of similar to what we used to have at AmFam or CUNA Mutual. And then we'll continue throughout the year with monthly events, so stay tuned for specifics. But there's other good data events happening as well that are not TUG related. And Milwaukee has an analytics after dark happy hour coming up on Eventbrite, is how you register for that. And Brandi, you're more familiar. I've never been to these events.
Yeah, so analytics after dark, I think just kind of, I know how it kind of came about, but this was before COVID. It kind of started happening, and it was very informal, just an additional way to network and get together with other folks in the local analytics space. It's not Tableau specific, although there are a lot of Tableau users that attend. But yeah, it's just kind of, it's usually sponsored. It's a happy hour, and yeah, we just get together and kind of just chat and nerd out about data. So you should definitely come.
Cool. All right, Robert, you're up. Tell us about the winners.
Pat. So we base it on the number of participants in the QA questions. I plug that into Google's random number generator and then find that particular question's person. So our winners are Bruce Landay and Kate. I hope I said that correct. Sokia. Put that into the chat. You guys are winning up to a $50 Tableau swag thing. So I think the easiest way for us to coordinate this would be if you message directly to me your email address, and we will get some other information and figure out what you would like to get from the Tableau store. Congrats. Thanks for your questions.
Cool. Congrats, Bruce and Kate, and thanks to everyone who participated today. We appreciate it. And once again, please reach out. So this are several different ways you can get in touch with us. Madison Tableau user group has an events page, as well as a LinkedIn group and Twitter. And Milwaukee has the email address there, in addition to LinkedIn and the events page. And we all coalesce in the Wisconsin Tug Slack workspace, which you're free to join at witug.slack.com. And with that, that's a wrap for today. Thanks again for joining us. Please reach out and let us know, did this time slot work? What other topics you'd like to hear about? And stay warm, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.